Hello, it's Rafael Gutierrez. Welcome to our channel. Today I'm going to talk about bone conditioning and how it actually works and why it works. But it's not going to be the bone conditioning that most people actually think about. Truth is, a lot of times what people do thinking they're doing bone conditioning is causing it's actually causing damage to them, and it's going to have long-term consequence to that. But before I do, there's something that I've been playing with for a while, and that is the whole idea of rank and associations and lineages. Now, I will say I've actually been fortunate to have really great teachers, some of which I mention a lot because I'm still under them. Some of them don't mention too much because I don't know if they would want me to mention them. They are actually great. They're all great instructors. They all have something that you can learn from them. And some of them I spent more time than others. And that's another big thing with this. And one of the ones I actually have mentioned before is my late teacher, which I will tell you a little bit more about him. But before that, I want to talk about organizations and lineages and rank, and just let you guys know one of the things I found. Now, the reason I'm actually bringing this up is recently I met a gentleman who told me straight out, without a problem, that he went to Asia. I won't say what country because it might give him away. He went to Asia and paid for his rank. Literally, he said, I gave the X amount of money for them to pass my test, and I gave them a couple $100 to give me my rank. So he came back to the U.S. as a 10th Dan. On top of that, he did a lot of other interesting things. He actually does run a big organization, and one of the neat things is a lot of times with big organizations, you have so many people talking about how great you are that people come to believe it, whether they believe it initially or not. And there's a lot of weird things with these with organizations. For instance, sometimes you have someone who ends up testing and gets a higher rank than someone else who is a lot better. Sometimes you have people, but people who don't know will look at two people and be like, "Oh, well, that's a 10th Dan, or that's an 8th Dan, and that's a 5th Dan." So 10th Dan or the 8th Dan must be so much better than the 5th Dan because he's 8, the other guy's only 5, right? But they don't know a lot of things. For instance, the one who's a 5th Dan may not have gone a test. He may have actually gone a train and just continuously trained harder and harder and harder and got to a level that he's actually knows more than most people in how to do the techniques the way they were meant to be done. Now, there are also other things that help in martial arts. And this is one of the interesting things I find is everything can be related to your martial art if you're really interested in it. What I mean by that is this. I teach a lot of public health classes, anatomy, physiology, microbiome, nutrition, kinesiology, and I can actually put everything I teach into martial arts. Now, a lot of times people say, well, that's just because you're crazy and you like martial arts way too much. But the truth is, everything I do can actually go back into it. And I can do that because of what I teach, what I know. Now, there are a lot of people who have never taken anatomy. They can't really add the clinical anatomy to it. There are some people who have engineering majors, who are engineers, and they can explain to you the body mechanics of techniques better than anyone else because, well, they're engineers, they know mechanics. Physicists, the same thing. You have people who study history, and they can actually give you the historic content of different things beyond anything that someone who doesn't study it. And so one of the things is sometimes people see someone who's a 5th degree black belt, someone who's an 8th degree black belt, and what ends up happening is they're just looking at these numbers, not realizing that there's a lot more that can change the way these people do or why certain things are. A lot of times, sometimes people have different ranks based on styles. There are some styles that they will say that a black belt is just a beginner. Well, if a black belt is just a beginner, anyone can be a black belt. If, on the other hand, we're talking about a black belt is a professional rank, well, then you have to be at a professional level to have a rank. You now have two different variations on how you're seeing black belt. And then the idea of what a professional is can also change. And so the thing is, you actually have all these lineages and ranks that come across, and most of the time it almost seems they're meaningless. Now, I always say almost because there are always variations to different things. Besides that, we've had different people come about who have actually come across that idea and taken it to a certain level. For instance, a lot of people mention how some martial artists have said, lineages aren't that important. It's what you can do. And so what we have is we do have people who have gone into MMA, have succeeded in it, and are now then teaching. Well, MMA is not anything that's copyrighted. It's almost like saying it's a sport. And so a lot of people will end up teaching MMA, claiming to teach MMA, even though they don't have the ring experience for MMA. And if you're in martial arts and you look around, you'll see this. And what people say is, well, all we're saying is we're mixed martial arts. We take our art and mix it with other arts. And I think that most people who do martial arts will do that. You'll mix what you know with what you learn from someone else. And so you end up getting a different art every time you teach it. Now, as you do have people who are teaching mixed martial arts who have never been in the ring, you have people who are teaching mixed martial arts who have pretty much UFC championships under their belt or some sort of championship under the belt. You have a broad range of people who are teaching MMA. And one of the funny things, I was talking to a gentleman who did teach it, who did train in MMA. He was telling me that they are starting to see lineages in MMA come up because of that reason. So, you can actually say, oh, well, who was your, if two people are talking about MMA and one of them says, well, I learned under someone who was a UFC champion at one point, and the other person says, well, I'm learning it from a guy who has a 10th degree black belt in so-and-so art, you can see that there is obviously a difference in the MMA taught by a guy who has won a a championship versus someone who is in a traditional art and decided for business purposes, I'm going to teach MMA too, because it's a popular thing. And so, people have told me that now in MMA, you are starting to have lineages come up. And it is important, and that's actually one of the things that ends up happening is lineages can become important. Now, there are other martial artists who have gotten rid of the entire rank system and the lineage. And they've said, well, look, we're just going to have teacher and student. That's it. And we don't really need lineages because it's based on what someone can do. Obviously, if you show up to a dojo and someone throws punches that you can hear every movement, and every student you hear every movement, a thinking person can say, okay, if you want to learn punches, this guy knows how to punch hard enough that it hurts. If another person claims to be a puncher and can't throw a punch through a paper towel, well, most people can see that. The problem is people fall for the advertisement. Let's be honest. Your average person is just that, average. Look at a bell-shaped, this is from George Carlin, you take a bell-shaped curve, average is in the middle. See what you meet outside as you walk around. We're not talking about people are being the brightest creatures on this face of the earth. We're talking about some of them do really stupid things, if not all the time, some of the times. Now, I actually used to know a guy who was involved in advertising, and he knew that most advertising was lying. He actually would say, yes, we're not lying, we're just pointing out the best we have. And what's funny is he fell for advertisement all the time. Kind of fun, huh? So the thing is, we actually are we sometimes look at different things, and we may not actually, even though we may see that there is someone better at this than someone else over there, if that person has a title, well, he has a title. There's some reason that he has a title. And so people do go to that. Now, what's interesting is when people actually there are founders of styles who say, look, we're going to get rid of lineages. Funny thing that happens is he may get rid of lineages, but the people who actually train after him go back and start showing off their lineages. Look, their lineages become important to them because this person who was really, really a well-known martial artist was able to say, well, we don't believe in lineages. It's based on what the person does. But after him, most of his students are not going to necessarily do much. And so, hey, it's like if you don't know who someone is, well, we follow lineages and we can see them. And that's one of the big things that ends up happening with martial arts is you do have a lot of these different things. The other thing that ends up happening is the whole martial art demo. And people forget what a martial art demo is. Yes, it is a demonstration, but it's a planned series of events. Very few demos are done with someone coming up from the crowd who doesn't know the person at all and trying a technique and the person working with the technique. This is for a couple of reasons. One is it's not safe for the person who's doing the demo, and it could be unsafe for the person who is volunteering. But the thing is, people watch a prearranged demo, and it's like watching a movie. It's like, wow, this guy can dodge all these punches and do this. Well, he knows where they're coming and how to do it, and the other person is trying not to hit them. But I talked a lot, and I would like to know, if you don't mind, what your opinion is on the whole lineage and, well, let's just say lineage thing. Now, what I'm going to actually what I did want to talk about is bone conditioning. And to actually understand bone conditioning and what it is, we actually have to understand the skeletal system. I've done a whole video on the skeletal system. If you go into the, what is it called, the anatomy list, you'll actually be able to go into development of bone and the bone system, or tissues of the bone and bone system. Now, if you look at bone, if you look at the skeletal system, you have bone, you have tendons and ligaments, which are a different type of tissue. You have cartilage, which is a tissue that helps bones keeping from grinding down on each other. And then you have actually different types of cartilage, but we'll leave it at that. And then you have other types of support tissues around it. Now, bone is a living tissue. It actually needs blood supply. And anyone who's broken a bone, you actually can, especially if it's a large bone, you can lose blood, and sometimes you do need blood via IV to replenish it. Cartilage, like I said, is between joints, and if you actually do damage to cartilage, it hardens, calcifies, and becomes bone, which leads to a condition called osteoarthritis. Now, tendons and ligaments are there, and they can actually be made stronger based on certain types of exercise. They can also end up being damaged with certain types of abuse or misuse or injury. And so we do want a lot of different things. Now, one of the things I have, and I've mentioned this before, right now this book isn't available. It will be again soon. It's a human anatomy book. And what you can see, if you look here, is you can see what cartilage looks like. And it's a little hole with a cell in it. And that's it. One of the things you don't see in here is blood vessels. What that means is if it's damaged, it tends to have a really difficult time healing. Bone, on the other hand, you can see it here, has that little hole here, which is called a central canal. And inside there, you have a vein, an artery, and a nerve. The vein and artery, that area kind of goes out and feeds the cells that make bone, called osteoblasts, and also do introduce bone to a cell that breaks them down, called an osteoclast. Now, when you condition bone, there's different ways to do it. One of them is through weight-bearing exercises. Now, a lot of people think you need weights to do weight-bearing exercise. But if you actually do a nihanchi or a squat type of movement, you're doing weight-bearing exercise. If you're doing a push-up, you're doing weight-bearing exercises. So all these things will make your bones a bit stronger. Now, there are some people who think, okay, the only way I'm going to make my bones stronger is through collision, so I get the microfractures and end up getting stronger bones. Now, you can do that, and you can make your bones harder, but as you do that, you tend to cause damage to nerves, which can end up leading to pain later in life, and even actually during life. If you actually do damage to your bones, you will end up feeling it. Now, how bones work is this. A lot of people think bones are dry little things like you see in the desert, but the truth is, if you've actually ever bought a bone-in steak, you notice that bone has a lot of fluid in it. Bone is a living tissue, and in it has, well, we'll talk about two main cells. One is called an osteoblast, one is an osteoclast. Osteoblasts tend to build up bone. Osteoclasts tend to bring them down. The reason you want to bring down bone is, for instance, if you need to reshape the bone because of the way it's being used. If you're using it a certain way, you can actually weaken it one side so you can make it stronger on the other. If you think of bone muscles pulling on bones, you sometimes need to make bones stronger in certain areas. Now, these actually work based on stimuli from usually weight-bearing type exercise. What that means is you can actually build up your bone without breaking it just by adding weight to the areas of bone. So technically, if you're coming across and slamming as hard as you can on your ulna, you can actually break it, and you can get the microfractures and then potentially make it stronger, but that actually damages nerves. If you actually go slow and put pressure on it, like you sometimes see people do slowly like that, ulna against ulna, slow push, you can build up the strength of the ulna. And as you build up the strength, it actually becomes less painful because what you're doing is you're making the bone stronger, which means that it actually experiences less damage when it hits. Now, I'm going to turn this just a little here. You can use makiwara to strengthen your bones, but in this, when you're doing that, you actually may want to go slow and build up. Don't just first day slam your arm against the makiwara and see how hard you can. Also, with knuckles, you actually do condition your makiwara here. Truth is, what you're really doing is you're checking your alignment. I actually found a thing in a lot of the boxing studies, and one of the things that they found is the most important thing to determine how hard people can punch wasn't weight, but rather how well the wrist is aligned when it made contact. So the straighter your wrist is when you make contact, for instance, if I'm here, it's going to actually give a little. If I'm here, it's just going to hit and go in. So the thing is, you always have to look. You have to look at what you're doing and why. Now, if you're conditioning your thinking you're conditioning your knuckles, the truth is, usually what you're doing is you're trying to condition the skin. Now, regardless to how much conditioning you do on skin, it will eventually tear. There's actually a maximum amount of times you can actually punch and twist before you actually sand off a layer of skin. And sometimes actually with the pressure and twisting motion, you can end up actually removing it from the bottom layer. You have a couple layers of skin, you can watch that, but I want to talk about bones right now. Now, if you're trying to condition your muscles by impact, and you're actually in an area where you have cartilage, again, you're going to cause the cartilage to become bone, and then you're going to end up with arthritis. And so the thing is, when you're dealing with conditioning, you have to actually use the facts. Do you need to do damage to yourself to build something up? The answer is no. Can you do it? Is there a benefit to it? Well, one benefit is that some people mention is, well, it's quicker. If you break something down, a couple days later, once you can train, you can do it harder. Now, see how that happens, because most people don't necessarily do it soft because they think, I'll go it hard and build up quicker. Go soft and continue doing something until it starts feeling discomfort. So, for instance, what I'm doing is, if you're coming against your hand here, continue, and once you start feeling discomfort, then you stop. Next day, you can actually do it. You might actually be able to get more power when you do your twist to block. Now, as I am always looking for topics to talk about, and I have had a couple people ask me if I would consider doing interpretations of kata, if I would do MMA, karate and MMA. Truth is, there's a lot of great channels who do the MMA. The idea of interpreting kata, I really think it's something that should be independent and individualized, because what I'm willing to do may not be what someone else is willing to do, and that's actually one of the biggest things. But I think as time goes on, I can actually explain why certain techniques work a certain way. But if anyone has any particular technique, I can actually work at that rather than interpretation of what's happening in kata. So if you like this, please subscribe. Let me know if you really like this and you want to self-support me. Consider right now the two books, Serious and the Rarest Things and Off the Rails. I am also going to be doing a signing in and around San Diego. It's actually, I can't remember. I think it's one of the valley areas around San Diego. I'll mention as we get closer. If you're in San Diego and you want to train, please let me know. I'm actually love having visitors. I love talking to people. I love talking to other martial artists. So if you're in San Diego and you want to talk martial arts, let me know. I'm here. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this.